It's good to see you this evening. Thanks for being here as we join together for this time of Bible study. We're studying an Old Testament survey. We're going to try to survey the whole Old Testament. That's a pretty big assignment to tackle. It will take a while to do it. We're not trying to go super fast, but we're not trying to get bogged down either. So we're going to continue at that pace, hopefully. We are right at the end of the book of Genesis, is where we continue tonight. And so if you're looking at your study guide, we're on lesson 5. And the first question there says, how long did Jacob live in Egypt? Remember, Joseph was sold as a slave, and then through that process we described last week, he was elevated to number 2 in the empire under Pharaoh. And then his brothers came. He made himself known to his brothers. Ultimately, the whole family came down to live in Egypt during the time of this intense famine, and they stayed. And in chapter 47 of Genesis, at verse 28, it says, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And so he came and stayed, and the whole family stayed, and he lived there 17 years until he died. And he made a request, verse 29, the time drew nigh that Israel must die, and he called his son Joseph. He said to him, if now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt, but I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, swear unto me. And he swore unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. And so he was buried where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah and Leah were buried, in the cave of Machpelah that Abraham had bought when Sarah died. And that's where they carried him back. There was a big procession of people who went, and he was buried back there. All right, so now that Joseph is in a position of power and the father Jacob is dead, he's in a position now where he can get even. Y'all, we're studying in the last chapters of Genesis. We're doing an Old Testament survey, and we're in about chapter 50 right now. You could think that Joseph would be anxious for this opportunity now. He didn't want to do anything to begrieve his father, but now his father is gone. He is in a position of authority and power, and he can do as he pleases, and he can take harsh retribution out on his brothers who did him so badly. Do you remember the dreams that Joseph had? That his brothers would bow down to him and pay homage to him. And that just infuriated his brothers when he told them those dreams. Well, it has come to pass right now. And it has fully come to pass. And I think a lot of people would, imagine, Joseph will take the opportunity to get even. But he does not. In the last chapter of Genesis, chapter 50, verse 18, his brethren also went out and fell down before his face. And they said, behold, we be thy servants. And there's the fulfillment of that prophetic dream that he had. And Joseph said to them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. That now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. And so, as we've been commenting about Joseph, he's a extraordinarily great individual. And as we mentioned last week, I think, as you study the Old Testament account, most of the Old Testament individuals, they're good people, but you see some sort of chinks in their armor. I don't think you do in Joseph's case. I think Joseph is just good throughout. And here at the end, what a noble thing. When he could have really gotten even with those evil brothers of his, he says he will not. And he could actually see the big picture, which is, I think, especially when you're right in it and when the circumstances affect you directly, it's hard to see the big picture. He could see the big picture. He said God meant it for good. And I think the way we would say that, the way we typically say it, is that God was able to use what those brothers did to accomplish the ultimate good that he intended for Abraham's seed. This is the question that we deal with a lot. And I keep telling you, I'm just not sure that our minds can fully grasp it. But that God does not cause anyone to do evil, but he can even when bad people do stuff, he can in his great power and sovereignty, and he can use the outcome of an evil deed to ultimately affect the end result that he wants. Now, somebody will always ask the question, what if Joseph's brother had not sold him in Egypt? What would have happened then? I don't know. Nobody knows. All we know is what did happen and how God used that to the ultimate good. And remember, there are promises to Abraham's seed. These promises, and so we got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob, Joseph. These are all in that lineage to which promises have been made that God will keep. God always keeps his promises. And so, however that's going to turn out, God's going to get this done. And again, I'm not sure that our sort of finite minds can understand the infinite dealings of God. Some of us have talked about this. We are all bound up in time and space. God is absolutely not bound up in time and space. And so we can't even analyze things fully as God, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways higher than ours. We can't even operate at that level. We're not capable of it. It's just not in our realm. So some of those answers we just have to leave at that God can bring ultimate good to pass. God will get his will done. Grant.
There's another verse, I don't know where it is in the Old Testament, but we just see the edge of what God does.
Yeah, just a tiny. Yeah, we just see just the very fringes of God's great power and ability. All right. So as Joseph was about to die, this land into the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now we just talked a minute ago. When Jacob died, they carried him back and buried him in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Leah. But they didn't do that with Joseph. Joseph, they embalmed him and kept him there in Egypt. But now, when the Exodus actually happened, one of the things we'll notice is that they took with them the bones of Joseph to take them back to the land promised to Abraham. Thoughts or comments, anybody here? Anything to add? All right, so book of Genesis. Man, there's a lot in the book of Genesis. There's just so much in the book of Genesis. And we have sort of just touched the hem of that garment too, but hopefully we're reminded of the very important chronological events in the book of Genesis. One of the things probably that we should stress as pretty often is we think this is real history. We believe it to be real history. This is not fairy tale or make-believe. This is not mythology or fables. This is real history. These were real people. These events actually happened. And I hope everybody understands as we study these things, that's the way we analyze it. That this is not talking about, this is not sort of symbolic mythology. This is real life, real history. Okay, so we get into the book of Exodus. So Genesis, these first two books, the names of these books are really appropriate. Genesis is beginnings. That's the beginning of everything. Exodus is Exodus. This is the children of Israel exiting out of Egypt. And so the name of the book of Exodus is certainly appropriate to the story that it tells as well. What happened, chapter 1 of Exodus in verse 8. Now, remember, Joseph is high-ranking, number 2 man in Egypt. Egypt, probably the most powerful country in the world at that time. And Joseph, number 2 man. So Joseph, likely the second most powerful person in the whole world at that point. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? But chapter 1 of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 8, there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And so now the tide is going to turn. Everything's been going real good for Joseph's kinfolks, his father and his brothers and all of their descendants. Things have been going real good because of Joseph. Joseph's in a position of high power and authority. He can make everything happen for them, and he did. But now he dies. And so in Exodus 1, verse 8, there's a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And notice, it says, he said to his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also to our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. And the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All of their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And so some things begin to happen. First thing that happens is, and it was all in the vein of they're starting to get afraid of the Israelites because they're so numerous. And they're so numerous, in fact, that it becomes a concern. If there's a war, these Israelites might join in with our enemies because they want to get out of here. And if they join in with our enemies, they'll overtake us. And so we got to do something to slow this down. So the first thing they did was to appoint these taskmasters, make their work really, really hard. But it didn't work. It says that the more they were afflicted, verse 12, the more they multiplied and grew. So more measures are going to have to be taken. And so then in verse 13, 15, verse 15, the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah. And he said to them, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So the midwives who helped in delivering the babies were given instructions that if you see a male child be born, you kill him. You can let the girl babies live, but kill the boy babies. Verse 17 says, but the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. So that didn't work. And then he made a general command to all the people. Verse 22, Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, every daughter ye shall save alive. So the midwives, working with the midwives, wasn't getting the job done for sure. So now here's a general rule. You can't have any boy babies. If you have a boy baby at your house, you've got to throw him into the river. Well, all of our kids well know the story of baby Moses, chapter 2. So when Moses is born, he is born into that circumstance. He's born into the circumstance where a male child is supposed to be cast into the river to perish. Chapter 2 says, there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife of a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him She took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein, and she laid it at the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to witness what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me. I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." All right, so Moses was a descendant of Abraham. He was an Israelite. But he now, we often talk about it, he was raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. She adopted him into the family. So Pharaoh's daughter was his stepmother or adopted mother, however you want to say it. And that would have made Pharaoh himself his grandfather. And so he's in the royal family of the Pharaoh by adoption here. Well, it doesn't last very long, because still in that chapter 2, verse 11, it came to pass in those days when, by the way, there's a lot of indication. There's even some secular historical writings that suggest Moses wasn't just hanging around the royal palace, just kind of a lazy bum, just soaking it all in. There's a pretty strong indication that Moses himself had risen in the ranks and potentially was a high official in Pharaoh's government at this point. The Bible doesn't say that, but there's been a lot of speculation and some historical footnotes that point to the fact that Moses had come up in the ranks, that he was the son of Pharaoh's daughter, but he was also, being promoted in the Egyptian, maybe in the Egyptian army specifically. But it came to pass, verse 11, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and he looked into their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, "Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow?" And he said, "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian?" And Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." And when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So things changed dramatically and in a hurry for Moses. Every indication is that he was doing just fine, thank you, in the royal court of Pharaoh, and maybe in the army of Egypt. But now something has happened and changed that. He never forgot his real lineage. His real lineage was he was an Israelite. And so when he saw this Egyptian abusing an Israelite that he regarded as a brother, he stood up for him. And he killed the Egyptian. The next day, when 2 Israelites are fighting, he tries to intercede, and one of them rebukes him. "You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses, "Oh man, this thing is known. I got to get out of here." And Pharaoh knew. Pharaoh did know, and Pharaoh was going to punish him. He sought to slay him for what he had done. So Moses fled to the land of Midian. It says the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that ye are come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flocks." And he said to his daughters, and where is he? Why is it that thou hast left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. And she bare him a son, called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. So Moses goes to the land of Midian. The land of Midian was to the east of Egypt, in the area that we would, I think, typically refer to as the Sinai Peninsula area. And so we've read already in our Old Testament studies about the Midianites. And so this would have been an area to the east, probably in that Sinai Peninsula region, is where Moses fled to get away from Pharaoh. He meets up with this man. Here he's called Reuel, and he's also referred to as Jethro. Moses' father-in-law also goes by the name Jethro, and he has and he marries a wife, and he has a child, and he's just doing his thing there in the land of Midian. Now, very famous episode begins chapter 3. Moses kept the flock of Jethro. Oh, there's Jethro. He had been called Reuel just up there, just verses before. Verse 18 of chapter 2 says they came to Reuel, their father. And he married one of Reuel's daughters, but now he's called Jethro. Chapter 3, verse 1, Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Horeb, what's another name for Horeb? That's Sinai, right? That's Mount Sinai. And so that is this Sinai Peninsula area. Near the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula area is this Mount Horeb. And as Moses is keeping his father-in-law's sheep, he's there. He's in that area. He's at that place. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. So I've always thought this is kind of funny when we ask the little kids in the drill class, what did God tell Moses to do at the burning bush? And they always say, take your shoes off. And he did do that, right? There in verse 5, he said, draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. And so he did tell them, take your shoes off. But for some reason, that seems to really stick in the minds of the little ones. They're very attentive to that. Take your shoes off. This is holy ground. But what I'm really trying to get them to say is, go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. That's what that's what this episode was really about. That he's to go. Verse 7, the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. He says, verse 10, come now, therefore, I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So this is the assignment. This is the job that God wants Moses to do. I imagine that you're very familiar with, because I have preached sermons, and you've probably heard numerous sermons upon Moses' excuse making. Just as soon as this job assignment is suggested to him, he begins to make excuses. Well, I'm not the guy for the job. I don't know, God. I don't know why you're picking me, but you picked the wrong guy. You need to find somebody else to do that. And we won't read all of this, but I just look at initial reaction. Chapter 3, verse 11, Moses said unto God, who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Verse 13, Moses said to God, behold, when I have come to the children of Israel, they shall say to me, the God of your fathers hath sent. I shall say to them, the God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God answers that. In other words, he said, how are they going to believe me when I tell you tell them that you sent me? Chapter 4, verse 1, Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. Chapter 4, verse 10, Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth, or maketh the dumb, or the deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. God, please find somebody else. I'm just not the man for this. Please find somebody else. And I think really, and you've heard a sermon point made about this, I'm sure. Verse 14 there in chapter 4. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. So what have we had here? We've had a progression of excuse making, right? And Moses has tried every which way to wiggle out of this assignment. And he's offered a bunch of excuses as to why he wouldn't be the right guy for the job. And now it says that the Lord was angry. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. I think there's a great takeaway in that for us because, we're pretty good excuse makers ourselves if you stop to think about it. We can come up with all kinds of excuses why I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm not the right person for that job assignment. And, all these kind of excuses why we don't do what we know we're supposed to be doing. And I think the thing that we should always remember from this story is God got mad at Moses. God got mad at Moses because of this excuse making. Why would we think God would be any different in regards to our excuse making? And we can offer some really flimsy excuses. When you're the one making the excuse, you try to construct it in a way that makes it seem pretty reasonable. But a lot of times, if you're the one who hears the excuse, you think, "Oh, come on, are you kidding me?" And so other people can very often see through our flimsy excuses. God can certainly see through them, and God gets mad when these kinds of things take place. That's a point worth remembering in all of this. Sarah?
In verse 22, it says, And Moses was educated in the learning of the Egyptians, and he was a man of power in words and deeds. God had specifically prepared him for this job.
And he wasn't even really telling the truth here. Yeah, exactly right. Good point. That's a really good tie-in, Sarah. Moses, as we said earlier, Moses was nobody's dummy. He was in Egypt. He'd been to the best schools in Egypt, whatever they were. He had received the best education that you could get if you were in Egypt. And Egypt was a highly developed and advanced country in its day. It was probably the most prosperous and wealthy and strong nation on earth. And Moses was right up there. And so these excuses are pretty thin, transparent. All right. So you remember that he agrees to send Aaron. Verse 14, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God. Thou shalt take this rod in thy hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. So Moses can't quibble anymore. Every excuse that he's tried to offer has been answered, and now God has even made the concession. Okay, take Aaron with you, and he will be like a mouthpiece for you. He can speak well. And I'll tell you, and you tell him, and we'll get this job done. So Aaron is to go with him. Any thoughts or comments? Again, we're skipping over some of the finer points. We're trying to get the bigger picture here. Are we doing that? Any questions or comments? All right, so they go to, Moses goes to Pharaoh, And Pharaoh's initial response is as you could imagine. Chapter 5, verse 1. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness." And Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go." And so the initial response is, absolutely not. What are you thinking? Absolutely not. It will not be so. Now, notice what Moses had asked for initially. And I think some people have a little bit of problem with this. Moses' intention was to get the people clear out of there, right? To free them from this bondage. But what he asked for initially was, we just want to go out. We just want to go out a ways and hold a feast. And I think some people have tried to imply that maybe Moses was less than forthcoming, not being honest. And I don't think you have to read it that way at all. In other words, this was a test of Pharaoh. Would you just let the people go out to hold a feast? Would you do that much? And Pharaoh's response is, absolutely not, I will not. I don't know who your God is. I don't answer to him. No, I'm not doing that. And so this was just an initial test of how's Pharaoh going to react to God and to the instructions of God. And so with Pharaoh saying, "No, I won't let the children of Israel go," then begins the signs and first of all some signs, and then of course, as you know, the 10 plagues that came. The first sign is let's see here, in chapter 5. So one of the things that happened because of this request, I'm still in chapter 5, look at verse 5. Pharaoh said, "Behold, the people of the land now are many, and ye make them rest from their burdens." And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, "Ye shall no more give the people straw to make bricks as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the tale of the bricks which they did make heretofore ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God." So Pharaoh, not only does he say no, he says, these people are lazy and rebellious. Obviously, if they got too much time on their hands, they wouldn't even be thinking about things like this. If they were working as hard as they ought to be working, I want you to make them work harder. So they're making bricks to build these cities for Pharaoh. And in the brick making process, you use straw. They had been providing. So I think I'm right about this. I think some people have imagined the straw you laid between layers of bricks so they didn't stick together, and I suppose you might do that. But the straw is actually in the brick mixture to sort of bind it together, so it doesn't just mush out when you're making the brick. You put straw in it as sort of fiber for the consistency of the bricks. And so the first thing that happens, they don't get turned loose. Things turn worse for them. And of course they murmur against Moses, and Moses complains to God about that. And so it's not progressing well. The first sign that was performed, let me see my notes here. So the first sign was with Aaron's rod. They went into Pharaoh in chapter 7. In verse 10, Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so as God had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. And Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt. But they also did in like manner with their enchantments. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, and he hardened Pharaoh's heart. So the first sign performed here was Aaron throws down his rod. It becomes a serpent. But then, and kind of surprisingly, the Pharaoh calls his guys, and they do the same thing. Now, how do you explain that? How do you explain what Aaron did was a true miracle of God, right? These wise men and enchanters and magicians in Egypt are not men of God. God is not empowering them to do a miraculous deed. How do you explain what happened here? Anybody? I think the key word here is that they were magicians. Verse 11, you might underline the word, at least King James. It refers to the wise men, the sorcerers, and the magicians of Egypt. They were magicians. They didn't, so Aaron's rod really became a serpent. The magicians, by trickery and sleight of hand, were able to make it look like they turned their rods into serpents. You ever seen some magicians do their magic tricks? You ever see a magician? I don't know if David Copperfield is still out there doing magic or not. I think there was some scandal associated with him several years ago. But you see some of those guys doing something, and how on earth did they do that? And there's no way you're going to figure it. They got tricks. They got sleight of hand. They got mirrors. They got all kinds of different things that they use. And it looks for all the world like they did it. And you know they didn't, right? They cut the legs off of a person, you know. How did they do that? And then they put them back together. Well, they didn't really cut the legs off, but it sure looked like they cut the legs off. They're magicians. That's what magicians do, right? And so that's what I think that's, take the statement at face value. He called the magicians. The magicians worked a magic trick, and it made it look like they could duplicate what Aaron did. But in a further sign of God's power here, Aaron's serpent ate up their serpents, right? And so again, that's going to happen a time or two before it all gets so bad that the magicians can't keep up anymore.
They did the same with their secret arts.
Secret arts, yeah. Let's see how they also did this matter with their enchantments, the King James says, or secret arts, yeah. In fact, I had another, enchantments are secret arts, right, exactly right. I think that's the explanation there. I don't think we have to be too tore up about that. Notice there in verse 13, I'm in chapter 7, verse 13. It says, he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. So another question that comes up a lot, and I know you all have heard this plenty of times, and I think the explanation is pretty straightforward as well. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Wow. So Pharaoh's a bad guy, and Pharaoh's going to do bad things. God make him do these bad things. He hardened his heart. Could Pharaoh have done otherwise? And someone said, well, he couldn't do otherwise. God was making him do the stuff he was doing. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. But it's worth noting, and I won't go through all these, but it's mentioned several times in the next several chapters. It goes both ways. It says God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but then it says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So look at, for instance, chapter 8, verse 15. When Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. So it's stated both ways. It's stated God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and it stated Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So I think the way to understand this is, I'm pretty sure this is the only way that we can make sense of it. God doesn't cause anyone to do evil. Don't forget, we have referenced this verse several times recently. In James chapter 1, at verse 13, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. God doesn't cause people to do evil. So God did not mandate Pharaoh's response. Pharaoh was like all people. Pharaoh was a free moral agent here. Pharaoh can do what God wants him to do or not. He can choose his own mind. His heart was hardened. The way God hardened Pharaoh's heart was to give him a choice. Let my people go or not. He kept putting that choice before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh kept So in that sense, God was putting forth the challenge, and Pharaoh was saying no. God didn't make Pharaoh say no, but he gave him the choice. He kept pushing the choice in front of him. And Pharaoh kept saying no. That's why you could say, God did it. God did it by offering him that choice. Pharaoh did it by making the wrong choice and saying no to these demands of God. Thoughts or comments on this, anybody?
Another thing there was, when it says Pharaoh hardened his heart, like with the serpents, the magicians were able to do something similar to what Moses did. That's pretty impressive. Let me see what my man can, let's see there, they can do something, so yeah, I'm not worried about you.
Yeah.
And then when the plagues come, Pharaoh says, have mercy on me, I'll let you people go, whatever. Then God takes the plague away. Now he's got an opportunity to harden his heart because God removed that.
Yeah.
So both, God gave him the opportunity because he removed it, and Pharaoh hardened his heart because he said he saw that opportunity now and he seized it. No, I'm not letting them go.
Exactly. I think that's the way it works. I think that's the explanation to that challenge. Okay, so we're not going to take time to study about how all of the plagues came to pass. I've written a list here of the 10 plagues, and I'll just read them in order. Turn the water to blood, frogs, lice, flies, death of the livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally death of the firstborn. You probably have read, there's been some analysis and some presentation that these 10 plagues, what was affected in the course of the plagues, all had to do with the various gods that the Egyptians served. The Egyptians, like lots of people, were polytheists. They believed there was a god for every different thing. And it's been argued, I think it's a fair argument, that these 10 plagues weren't just random in nature, but each of the plagues approached and attacked some aspect of a god that the Egyptians served. And it showed God's power over these false gods of the Egyptians. I think you can read quite a lot about that, but I think there's probably a pretty good foundation for that kind of analysis. Thoughts here, Wayne?
Where I went to school, it was a Baptist school, they taught that these were all natural phenomena just enhanced by God. The water was turned to blood, that caused the frogs to come out, that caused the flies to come out, that caused the disease of the animals. All those were natural progressions. The water that turned to blood was the red tide. It was an algae debris. It wasn't really blood. So they said these were all natural phenomena. They were simply enhanced by God.
Well, that is a modernist approach to biblical interpretation, to try and assign a natural, to denigrate the miracles, get rid of all the things that are supernatural, of course, which I think if you really took that apart, you could destroy that line of thinking pretty thoroughly. All right, anything else here? Okay, so we got just a couple minutes left. Of course, the Israelites had been spared the immediate impact of these plagues that came upon the Egyptians, and you would think the Egyptians would be wondering, I wonder why we're having all this hardship. We're in the Israelites are over in that area called the land of Goshen. It's part of Egypt still, but it's a separate district called the land of Goshen. They're over there and they don't seem to be having the same trouble we're having. I wonder why that is. I don't know. Finally, the worst of the 10 plagues was the death of the firstborn. And I want to read, we got just time to read this. We might comment a little bit more next week, Lord willing. But the Lord spake, this is chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and in the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. They shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper doorpost of the house wherein they shall eat it. They shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs and the purtenance thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, with your shoes on your feet, with your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be to you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by the ordinance forever. And so the 10th, the worst, the last plague is coming, the death of the firstborn. How will the Israelites avoid this happening in their houses? Well, you're going to take this lamb and you take his blood, you paint the doorpost of your house. And when I pass over, he says, when I see the blood, I'll pass over. And so they'll be spared. If they're in the house where the blood is on the doorpost, that blood of the lamb will serve as a sign, and God will pass over them. The Egyptians, of course, wouldn't know to do that. And so the firstborn in their houses are going to die, including the firstborn in Pharaoh's house, by the way, died in that. And this became an annual mandated observance for the Israelites ever after that. What was it called? The Passover, right? Because God passed over them when he saw the blood of the lamb on the doorpost. All right, we'll pick up our study there next week, Lord willing. Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. If you have your Bibles and you want to turn to the book of Micah, I'm going to focus on a verse near the end in Micah. So the deepest part of the ocean is the Challenger Deep, located at the southern end of the Mariana Trench in the western Pacific Ocean. This is southeast of Japan and east of China. It is the deepest part known on Earth, with a maximum depth of 35,876 feet. This point is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. 35,876 feet. That's a little under 7 miles. It's a little less than the distance from here to my house. Many of you have been there, so just short of 7 miles. We know that sin separates us from God. We know that sin should make us sorrowful and penitent and humble and regretful. I've recently considered what sin does to God. And here are 5 things I want to share with you that sin does to God. The first 2 things: sin makes God hate and detest. Proverbs 6:16 through 19, it says, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood," and so on. We know that passage. Also in Psalm 4 and 5, it says, "For you are not a God who is pleased with wickedness. With you, evil people are not welcome. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong." So first 2 things that sin does to God, it makes him hate and detest. The next 2 things that sin does to God, it burdens and wearies him. In Isaiah 43:24, we see the result of the Israelites' vain worship. It says, "You have not brought any fragrant calamus for me, or lavished on me the fat of your sacrifices, but you have burdened me with your sins and wearied me with your offenses. And the fifth thing, sin makes God angry. Psalm 7:11, God judgeth the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day. That's an interesting thought to me. Every day, God is up in heaven angry with people who do sin, with the wicked every day. So, we clearly do not want to be on the side of sin that makes God hate and detest, that burdens him, that wearies him, on the side of sin that makes God angry every single day. We know Hebrews 10:31 tells us it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. There's no middle ground with God. On one side is his anger and hate and being wearied and burdened by sin. But, and here's the other side of God, the side we want to be on, his side of forgiveness and mercy, pardon, compassion, graciousness, and attentiveness. Hosea 14:4 says, I will heal their waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them. Isaiah 55:7 says, let the wicked forsake their ways, and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. Isaiah 30:18, yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him. And 1 Peter 3:12 says, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. And if you're in Micah, look at chapter 7, 18 and 19. And this is one of the most comforting passages for me because I need to be on the same side of sin that God is. Micah 7, 18 and 19. It says, who is a God unto thee? Let me back up. Who is a God like unto thee, that pardoneth iniquity, and passeth by the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He retaineth not his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. He will turn again, and he will have compassion upon us. He will subdue our iniquities, and thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. You remember how deep that deepest part of the sea was? The deepest part of the ocean, the Challenger Deep, 35,876 feet. The point is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. I'm so glad that the sea is so deep, because that's where God will cast my sins if I turn to him and if I'm right with him. 35,876 feet. Which side of sin are we on? This evening, to extend the invitation, if you have any private sin in your life tonight, approach God's throne of grace with confidence. Like the father of the prodigal son, he's actually longing and anxiously waiting for us. He delights in mercy. He delights in meting out mercy. He longs to be gracious to us. Those are wonderful thoughts. He's waiting. He delights in handing out mercy. And he longs to be gracious. That's just amazing to me. So, for anyone, if there's a sin or a salvation need in your life this evening that we can help you with in a public way, please let it be made known as we stand and we sing the song of encouragement.